Well, my father had his first nearly fatal heart attack on my 9th birthday. And I have the only male heir that Lyndon Johnson had of the grandchildren generation. And it is my goal that my son not fall into the category that all of his male members of his family before him have, of not reaching the age of 65 due to cardiovascular disease. And so years and years ago, I got very involved with the American Heart Association when my little boy was young, and that was my motivation. But as time has marched on, and as my work in the Heart Association began back then, I came to realize that cardiovascular disease is not in just the domain bastion of male of the male kingdom. It is the #1 killer for females as well, and with very different symptoms frequently, and yet very equally painful outcomes if not warded off. And today there's so much we can do in terms of diet and exercise and lifestyle, and yet the medical and surgical aspects to prolong all of our lives and give heart disease the back door. Well, my husband has a stent, so we're personally very interested, obviously. But diet and exercise are very much part of our regime. My children will be mortified that I didn't take my Fitbit off for this interview, but it's kind of thing I've got to an addiction, I think, because that ability to measure and hold yourself accountable is really exceedingly helpful to me, and we have all kinds of complements to our lives that can really help us do the right thing if we just own up to it and follow through. And so I think that the American Heart Association Texas affiliates work today in trying to bring an awareness to all of us that heart disease is something women need to be concerned about, not just for their families, but for themselves. And there is an awful lot we can do to hold heart disease in abeyance if we just have the will, the knowledge, and the commitment. Well, I think in many more ways than just wearing red in Heart Month. I think that people have begun appreciative of two things. One, that they can control some of this just by the way they live and the way they help those they love live. Just recently, I had a good friend who went in for a general wellness check and ended up coming out with a bypass. So that annual exam is something that we can't afford not to do. I worked for the Heart Association back in '72, and then I had some very painful health issues myself and couldn't stand the fact that I hadn't kind of completed my mission. So I came back and worked for them in '73 and '74 for a considerable amount of time. And as my father had traversed all 254 counties in Texas for the Democratic Party, so did I for the American Heart Association, and it was some of the most rewarding years of my life. Well, and people, it's done. You know, we all tend to be influenced by each other and what seems to be expected of each other. And Austin's wonderful hike and bike trail, now known as the Butler Trail next to Lady Bird Lake, it's also very personal to me. It's personal to me because of my family's history. As I said, my father had his first heart attack on my 9th birthday, but if he had run, and that's a big if, and if he had won another term at the United States presidency, and if he had lived as long as he did, he would have lived just 2 days after returning to Austin, because he died on January 22nd, 1973, 2 days after President Nixon was sworn into office again. And of course, everybody appreciates that the presidency is the most stressful job that anybody can have. And it was that he didn't run, I think, largely because he felt like the American people couldn't face losing 2 presidents back to back, and he was just respectful of how fragile his health was. So I'm now 71, recognizing that if you don't have your health, what do you have? And if you do have your health, what joy in life there is to have, because there's nothing more rewarding than a purpose-driven life. And I'm thrilled that the American Heart Association thinks that I can come to them and bring some sense of purpose to others, recognizing that if we stand up and are counted and begin to obey the rules and implement them in our own homes, our own families, we can make a huge difference for the health, not just of ourselves and those we love, but for the health of our nation. Thank you.
I think that they need to get some shots of
My
us
pleasure,
just
you
chatting
bet.
for a second,
Thank
and then
you.
we'll be